mode.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to the rest of the world. Out here in California, it's a wonderful evening, and I welcome you to the Strategic Project Initiatives and Management webinar, or as I've called it, the Shifting Your Project Management into High Gear. I'm Joe DeCarlo, the Director of Research and Technology and Senior Consultant at the Balanced Scorecard Institute, headquartered in Cary, North Carolina. Let us give you an overview of my background. I spent about 25 years with the IBM Corporation doing a number of different activities, much of which was around hardware and software in regards to the hardware platforms, various application software, artificial intelligence, knowledge-based systems. While I was with IBM, I started at the Milwaukee School of Engineering as a university management executive level and instructor, and then I went on to become an executive in residence for a technology startup incubator in Sunnyvale, California called Plug and Play, and joined the Balanced Scorecard Institute in approximately 2009. Much of these international and domestic locations have either worked, lived, or consulted or taught classes, both for IBM Corporation and for the Balanced Scorecard Institute. And I hold an MBA in Technology Management from the University of Phoenix, and I'm a doctoral candidate this year from the University of Phoenix as well. One of the things that I'll do, and I'll ask you if you pause on this slide for just a couple of minutes, if you want to take a pencil and paper and write down my email address that's shown right here. I'm flying solo here tonight. Usually I have a colleague who watches the question box for me, and she sends me over another service your questions so I can answer them on the fly. But as you can suspect, they are fast asleep on the East Coast, and so I'm having to do all of this without her support tonight, or morning or afternoon, or late afternoon your time. And so I'm going to ask, if you have questions, send them to me either directly at this email address, or send them to this address down here during and after the webinar, and I'll respond to them individually. You will receive a link to this webinar. It's being recorded. And if you want a copy of the slides that are in this deck, send an email to that balancedscorecard.org/contact or to my direct email from the previous slide. Also, there's a couple of sections in this webinar that I have parts of sample plans, both communications and evaluation plans, that you can send me a direct request for, and I can send you the full plans in PDF format after the webinar concludes. So let us shift into high gear for strategic initiatives and project management. Now, in our terminology in the Balanced Scorecard development, initiatives and projects are interchangeable. Some of those initiatives may be portfolios of projects, depending on how many initiatives that you decide to take on as a strategic initiative or a strategic group. But the key thing is, it's all part of some process that you put together so that you get a fully functional and rolling balanced scorecard or strategy plan. And if any of you attended my webinar earlier this year on alignment, you'll know that I use this NASCAR stock car theme as a backdrop for these webinars, because what we do in strategy development, strategy planning, strategy implementation, scorecard development, scorecard rollout is very much like the teams do when they start creating cars to race in the Daytona 500, for instance, here in the United States. You really want a good alignment of all your systems, all your activities, all your capabilities, So when you hit that green flag at the start, everything's rolling like it should be. Everyone's in order, everything's in order, everything's flowing, and the system's working as designed. But we all know from experience that sometimes things go wrong, and you have to react to those wrong activities, so to speak. Sometimes they can get pretty ugly in terms of what the system's telling you, what the system's advising you, what your scorecard is telling you based on how you designed it, how you put it in play. And things can get pretty messy as you continue on in your execution of your strategic plan. And consequently, we have to go to the yellow flag, which in all international car racing says we're going to slow down. We got to take stock of what's going to happen. And at that point, even stock car racers, Formula One racers, they're not very happy. And neither are you as a strategist or as someone who's managing a strategy management system, because now you've got to go in and figure out just exactly what the problem is. So there's basic rules of the road with regards to strategic initiative project management. And the green lights, much like they do in racing, they're going to signify tips and techniques to set the scorecard and strategy in motion and keep it in motion in order to generate value for customers of the organization. In other words, these are the must-dos. Green lights, must-do. Communications, programs, and alignment efforts across the entire organization. Everybody has to understand exactly what they need to do to contribute to the strategy. And in regards to the projects and initiatives as well as the portfolio of projects. You're always going to have to monitor the implementation and execution of the scorecard. What's going on with your strategy? You're going to have to look at it on a reasonably frequent basis to make sure that it's performing as you designed and giving you the information that you sought back, and also looking at the individual projects. Clearly, the red lights are the traps to avoid in the implementation execution of the scorecard. In other words, the do not forget to do or ignore. Those red lights are usually things that you either forget to do or that you ignore. Now, this presentation in this webinar is based on the Balanced Scorecard Institute's 9 steps to success. There are 9 specific steps that we use to roll out the design, put in play, evaluate, analyze, balanced scorecard strategy-driven systems. Program launch, assessment, strategy, objectives, strategy map, targets, and step 6 is where we're really focusing today on this webinar, which is the initiatives, the projects that are going to be put in play to assist with the strategy that's been designed in steps 1 through 5. Eventually, you're going to have some performance analysis, which is nothing more than some kind of performance software. You're going to have to do some alignment of the departments and teams and individuals through alignment or cascading. And then we're going to talk a little bit about this evaluation, step 9, which really has to start as soon as you get done with the system rollout at the conclusion of step 6. When we talk about what a balanced scorecard is, it usually has these 3 components. It's a communications tool. That scorecard in itself is a communication of the vision and mission strategy to the employees and other stakeholders. A lot of our clients we create for them a special graphic. They use this in the hallways, they use this in meetings, newsletters to communicate the strategy. It should align the day-to-day work to the vision and strategy. You want everyone in the organization understanding exactly why that strategy is a part of their life and what they can do to contribute to it. It provides a framework. In the 9 steps or the scorecard itself, it's a framework for prioritizing projects, services, products, and resources. One of the things we'll do a little later in this webinar is talk about a prioritization process for strategic initiatives. And lastly, it's a strategic performance measure system. So you set measures against the objectives, targets, and you measure the progress of those strategic objectives. So it communicates, aligns, it's a framework, and it uses strategic performance measures. If there's one slide in this deck in regards to a balanced scorecard that when you get the, if you could take a picture of it when you get the link, or if you get the listing of the PDF deck from me, is this slide right here. Because a scorecard or strategy is made up of these specific layers of this pyramid, starting at the 30,000 foot level and coming down to ground level. The key thing on this particular slide is look at the amount of real estate that the strategic initiatives or the projects occupies in regards to the total strategy. It should come as no surprise that if I were to ask you, if we were in a client location, or if you were in one of my classes, and I do this, by the way, I ask everyone by show of hands, how good is your organization at the execution and completion of strategic initiatives or projects? Because if your organization has a less than average track record of completing strategic initiatives, you're putting your entire strategy plan in jeopardy, because it's the foundation of this pyramid. I often say if you don't do it well, you're putting the pyramid in danger of toppling over, because that strategic initiatives is the foundation of what needs to be done for the strategy. The layer above, performance measures and targets, you'll find as a slide coming up that the strategic objectives have two streams of influence that support it. The measures and the targets, so that you can understand if that objective is performing the way you wanted it to perform, and initiatives, which help support the execution of that. So those last three layers are the key to the strategic plan in your strategic scorecard. But the initiatives are by and far the big hitter in terms of success of your strategy. This gear slide kind of goes along with the car racing theme. The vision and mission drive the strategies is then driven by strategic objectives, and the budgets and actions at the back end. That last box are projects, activities, and tasks, and which of course are made up of schedule, scope, resources, and risk. Now this particular slide kind of lays out the first exhibit of a scorecard. So in this entire presentation, this slide is what's called a scorecard, in case you're brand new to building strategies using Balanced Scorecard. You've got a set of corporate strategic objectives in the leftmost column, which have been designed to resolve the mission and vision positively. This particular listing with the perspectives of financial, customer, internal process, and organizational capacity are set to the theme of a for-profit organization. If you happen to be a government or nonprofit, those top two perspectives are just reversed, and the customers on top are the community stakeholder constituents, and the financial stewardship is in the second perspective. But the things in commentary, objective owner, performance measures, targets, and initiatives stay the same, regardless of what type of organization you are, profit, nonprofit, or government. The commentary, what's the intent and scope of the objective? You design these objectives, so we need to know what is it and what's the intended result. Because the intended result, by the way, is driven to the definition by the measures and targets. What strategic projects must be implemented? Those are that other stream of influence going against those objectives. Who is responsible and accountable? The objective owners. That is a very key part of this process, and we're going to talk about that in just a couple of slides. And then eventually, you're going to have to cascade or align this to your departments and the individual teams and employees through an alignment cascading process. Because one of the things I freely tell clients and students in my classes is that no organization can create an organization-wide scorecard and claim total alignment of the strategy until they align or cascade down to teams and individuals and departments. So there's a couple more steps in place that need to be done to claim total alignment of their strategy. Here is the objective owner roles and responsibilities, and this becomes very important in this webinar on strategic initiatives and projects. The objective owners that get assigned to those objectives from the previous slide usually have a couple of assistants. A performance measure owner, which is a statistician, someone that understands data dependencies, understands how the performance measures were designed and how the targets were set. And then eventually a project manager and project team to work on each of the projects that have been scoped out to have that second stream of influence against the strategic objectives. Now, that's a luxury for some organizations. If you're a big organization and you've got hundreds of employees, and usually an objective owner can have these individual helpers so that there's no less than maybe 3 as a minimum people helping an objective owner on a particular strategic objective. But what if you're a small organization? Suppose you only have 50 people or you have 100 people. Well, the case in point is that some people are going to be wearing multiple roles. Some are going to be the performance measure owner, and some are going to be the project manager, and may indeed be part of the project management team. So it all goes through, but it doesn't change the fact that they all have specific roles to play, and these are the various things regarding oversight and accountability, reporting, strategic thinking, and analysis. Everything that's listed on this chart is what they're expected to bring to the table during the evaluation process of your scorecard and your projects. They're the ones that are watching what's happening in the background, reporting progress against project milestones, resource performance, risk, cost, and scope. They're the ones that are tracking the scheduling and the cost variances, especially in relationship to the strategic initiatives or projects. So as we shift this scorecard or this process into a high gear for project management, I want to talk about 4 areas of this shifts that we're going to cover in this webinar. The first is the state of the strategic initiatives project management. The states meaning, what's the current environment like? What's the current environment regarding project management? What are the factors contributing to poor project management? I hate to present this in a negative standpoint, but the state of project management and the factors contributing to poor project management loom there. The good news is, you'll see in a minute, they've gotten better, but they're not great yet. What is this project management maturity model? And also the project management body of knowledge, which basically comes from the Project Management Institute, or PMI. Next, we'll cover a topic on I call it scorecard tune-up. This is your evaluation process. Do you do it monthly? Do you do it quarterly? Do you do it annually? Or do you have the luxury of having a performance management system already in place where you can do it basically on a weekly basis or daily basis if you want? But the fact of the matter is, you have to put some periodic evaluation steps in place. You have to do a reassessment of the M&M environments. And that's not the candy in the little bags. That's macro and micro environments that affect your organization. And do you have the right communications programs in place? I will give you a hint. There's going to be a lot of discussion about communication around project management, because that is going, as it turns out, is one of the biggest problems of the success of projects, is the need for a high amount and large frequency of communication. The third is strategically develop your initiatives and projects. How do you determine the initiatives? How do you go through the prioritization? And I'm going to take you through the high-level steps that I use when I'm working with my clients to help them take a large number of ideas or initiatives and get them affinity grouped down and prioritized to a workable number. What are some of the project management methodologies that are out there? One of the things in this project management aspect is that you're going to have to get your head around using one of the methodologies. Is any other one of the methodologies better than the other? Not really. They all come to the same end point. And I have one slide that compares 3 of them together. The one thing that I constantly hear from clients and students in class is that project estimating is the key problem that they have. They either scope ineffectively, and they definitely then estimate the dollar amounts poorly. And this can be traced back to a lot of things, but project estimating, and we'll cover a couple of slides on that. Understanding the work breakdown structure and timelines, understanding how you have to do that. This 3rd bullet, by the way, is a lot of what I call just basic project management 101. And the good news is there's quite a big wealth of references out there that you can get from just about anywhere on the internet, and they're usually all focused around the same body of knowledge, which is from the Project Management Institute. And last but not least, we'll cover a couple of slides on when you have the performance measurement software in place, how you can monitor not only your corporate initiatives, but also your department and teams and individual projects as well. So let's talk first about the state of strategic initiatives in the project management world. On the left, you see the proverbial 3-sided triangle, which is basic project management: schedule, resources, and scope. And what we're now looking at is that same triangle, but we're focusing the same elements of schedule, resources, and scope, but now everything's on a strategy basis. So that kind of says is the first peek at when you design your strategy plan or your strategy scorecard and you attach initiatives to those strategic objectives, you have now made projects strategic because they have an attachment to that strategic objective. So one of the first things you'll run across in this process is if you have projects when you're done designing your strategy or your strategy scorecard, and all of a sudden some of these projects you've been doing for years don't have a home in terms of the strategic objective, the first question that comes to mind is, are those currently running projects strategic? Believe me, the first time through on your first strategy plan or your strategy scorecard, you will have a number of your current projects that will fall into this category that really need to be talked about. And many of them, at most meetings that I've attended with executives, they come to the conclusion that they have to gracefully end their existence because they're not strategic. They became more operational. So keep that in mind, that these projects are all looking at a strategy-based approach. The first state of project initiatives and management is that few organizations effectively manage strategic initiatives well. The high effective ones are only in the 18% range. There's minimal effectiveness at 18, and there's moderate effectiveness at 64%. Part of the problem of this is when you get into the strategic initiative realm or domain, you actually are driving change in the organization by the very nature of those projects. So you almost backed into a change initiative with these projects. And some of these projects are very, very different for the organization to have to tackle because in the absence of a prior strategic plan or a scorecard, they were just doing day-to-day projects, day-to-day work. So it's a whole different environment. And I think the thing that's interesting here is that these statistics are current. They're March 2014 from Project Management Institute, and it was a study that was conducted in January of this year among 723 project management practitioners with 5 or more years of project management experience and who are currently doing professional project, program, or portfolio management as a part of a full-time basis. So this is not, these are very much ground level practitioners that are responding to this particular element here on effective management of strategic initiatives. The other unfortunate news is that if you don't effectively manage the initiatives, you'll lose a lot of money. For instance, $109 million for every U.S. $1 billion invested due to poor project performance. But the key one is this middle bullet. But when specifically looking at strategic initiatives, organizations report that only 52% of these are successful. So they're only batting a success rate of roughly 50%. So if you've got 10 strategic initiatives running, they're basically saying you're only going to be successful on 5. So that's one of the reasons that we talk a lot about getting the number of strategic initiatives down to a workable number. Because do you want to do 100 things poorly or 10 things well? And that's why we go through an initiative prioritization routine later on in this webinar. As it turns out, they can focus on 2 key elements that are the problems that organizations' initiatives fail. Lose money, basically. There are insufficient communications, and there's a lack of leadership. And this is an unusually high percentage, I would think. So the communications, as I mentioned on an earlier slide, is going to be a common theme through this entire process. Are you, as the project or portfolio manager, communicating enough with your stakeholders? And are your executives communicating enough about the benefits of the projects? I can pretty well guess that both parties are at fault here, because as portfolio or project managers, sometimes we get too bogged down with the day-to-day activities, and either we don't want to report bad news, or we celebrate ourselves or with our small project group when there's good news, and we forget to tell the rest of the world. That's where the leadership should be coming in and saying, you've got good things to report. We need to go out and do that. And that's why one of the things later on with initiatives is that I always advise and coach clients to say, when you resolve one of your initiatives positively, that's a communications moment. You've got to let the rest of the world, the rank and file of the organization, know that you've solved some of these and you've completed successfully some of these initiatives that you're working on. There are some organizations that are effective with the initiative process, and they have put certain practices into play that they feel are necessary to maintain that high effectiveness. They are listed here: well-defined milestones and metrics. It stands to reason that this would be analysis to creating the metrics and the performance measures for the objective. We spent a lot of time designing the objective. We put a lot of time into the performance measure design and the targets. Why not do the same thing with the projects? So we've got them very well defined. What about senior management committed to the change, committed to the projects? That just has to go without saying. Concrete ownership and accountability. Well, the whole strategy plan, objective ownership aspect, project management ownership aspect, that's all about ownership and accountability. We have to get into some standardized project management practices. There's no question about that. If you don't follow the rigors of one of the methodologies that you use, regardless if it's PRINCE2, if it's MPMM, if it's PMBOK from PMI, it doesn't matter. You have to follow something in that regard. And the other thing is those sponsors have to stay engaged. And as project or portfolio managers, it's almost a written responsibility for the portfolio or project managers to keep those sponsors engaged so that they can carry the message. So bad news on insufficient communications and lack of leadership, but good news from those organizations that do this well. Here's their 5 elements or 5 areas that they feel are necessary to excel in. The other thing that's a problem is effective communication plans are not in place. That's where you'll see me recommend that later on coming up. Effective execution of the plans. I can't tell you how many students I talk to in class or how many clients that I've worked with, and I've laid out the entire communications plans for them, and I come back and say, and what was the result of those execution plans, of those communications plans on the execution side? and I hear total silence. We planned it, they didn't execute it. So you have to execute on the plans that you put in place. You have to identify, measure the communications of the intended benefits of the change. Most important thing. It's really good to set up all the criteria for a project. You're looking for all of these different things in terms of the scope, the resources, etc. But what about the benefits that are being gained? And this is what the leadership has to communicate. The leaders have to communicate the benefits of why these initiatives are being done. And look at that center bullet. PMI research has found that 1/2 of unsuccessful projects are related to ineffective communications. So going back to that previous percentage, which was 52%, PMI is saying flat out communications will ensure a 52% failure rate if you don't, or a 50% failure rate if you don't communicate well. You might say, geez, Joe, you're getting me hung up here on this communications thing. But I do that because by nature, if we're in this business of project or portfolio management, we're a little bit on the technical side. And it's a fact of life that technicians, engineers, process guys, they don't like to communicate much. So you have to kind of move this into your normal course and speed in being a project or a portfolio manager. Now, there are a couple things contributing to poor project performance when implementing an approach to project management. Poor estimates and missed deadlines. Going back to what I said earlier about, not doing the estimates or the pricing or the costing well. This is a big one. And by the way, you can see that this is from 1,524 respondents from 38 countries within 34 industries. Lack of executive sponsorship. Once again, we got the executives not living up to walking the talk. Poorly defined goals and objectives. That's all part of the scoping. Changes in scope mid-project. Any of you that run projects and there's a scope change, how many of you have sat through a request to do a scope change? You think you've got the entire project or portfolio plan committed to memory. You think about it. You get a couple of phone calls. You don't do the homework and check about what the impact will really be, and you just say, okay, fine, we'll make the change and I'll document it. Well, you find out a month later it's really a problem because now you've just put the entire Gantt chart out of whack and you didn't sit down and do the necessary due diligence to make sure that the scope change wasn't going to have a negative impact. So part of that is the project or portfolio manager's responsibility to make sure that they really do think and do the homework for the scope change to make sure it doesn't have negative consequences. Insufficient resources. I think that's a fact of life for anyone in the business world running portfolio projects or a single project. We all would like more resources, be it money or people. We all know the effects of the macro environment on our businesses. I think over the years, I've just adopted this attitude that when I have a insufficient resource, I'm going to improvise, adapt, and overcome the problem, because it doesn't make much sense to burn up the wires, burn up the keyboard, the emails, requesting resources, because you know in the first place you're not going to get it. So you have to improvise, adapt, and overcome. Poor communication. You can't communicate enough. We'll see something a little bit from John Cotter coming up that basically says when you think you've communicated enough, you probably haven't communicated. Once is not enough, 10 times is not enough, maybe even 1,000 times is not enough. Stakeholder involvement. Keep those stakeholders close. Stakeholders don't like surprises. And consequently, if you don't keep the communication chain going from above, in that bar chart above, then you're going to have stakeholders not very happy. What about change environment? In the environment, that's the macro, one of the M's of M&M. You might have a change in the internal, micro as well. A change in strategy. You might have a whole different change in strategy. Maybe you sold off certain departments or divisions. Maybe you acquired and that's going to change your entire strategy. Inadequate risk planning. This day and age, if you can think of the worst situation, there could be some credence that says it could happen. So you have to see what the risk, you have to put a risk register together so you know how that impacts your particular project. And the other thing is a lack of a change management process. And that may be strictly on the project level or portfolio level, so that you can understand how to encounter and make changes and make sure that it doesn't have bad consequences on your portfolio or your project plan. This was an interesting piece of research that I found on the project management maturity. The Balanced Scorecard Institute has one on strategic management maturity model coming up later. But this one is from PwC in 2012, and I'm not going to go through this in detail. You can read this when you look at the link later on. But they have level 1 is sporadic use of project management techniques. Initial, formally approved PM methodology. A PM methodology is developed and approved, so you've implemented it, but the focus is on individual projects. Monitor kind of says you've got a project management office in place, which, by the way, in some organizations, the project management office has morphed or transitioned or transformed into the strategic management office, which makes perfect sense, especially if you've got high-costed, high-resource involved strategic project initiatives going against your strategy plan. It makes perfect sense for the PMO to become the SMO. And then finally, you want to be to the optimized level, which is you just do this normally as a normal course and speed of your normal daily routine. So let's take a look at what PwC found. Now, the good news here is that between 2004 and 2012, the monitor significant % increase. The good news is that while in 2004 there was a high percentage of sporadic, very low, so the message is getting across. Not much change in initial or implement, and not much change in the optimized. But everybody would like to be a level 5, but it's going to take some time to get there. But the good news is the monitoring side has taken a significant improvement. Let's talk about the project management body of knowledge from the Project Management Institute, or as most project portfolio managers like to say, the PMBOK. It's currently at the 5th edition. Well, when you really pour through that multi-hundred-page document, couple hundred-page document from PMI, it's all about the projects in these particular areas. So it's the management process. What are you doing to manage the new projects coming on board and the current projects that you currently have on? It's all about the integration management. So when you talk about integration management, you're going to take in the currently running projects with the new strategic initiatives. So you have to develop some kind of an integration plan. You have to develop a integrated change control process, and you have to create all the other work performance data that comes out of that, such as validated scope, control schedule, control costs, all the control quality, control communications, risks, procurements, and stakeholder engagement. That part doesn't go away. There's the scope management, which has its own particular set of activities, time management, cost management, quality management, human resource. Even PMBOK says communications management is required. What are you going to do for your communications plans? You're going to assess the risk through your risk register. What are you going to do on procurement, because you got to keep the people working? And what are you going to do to inform and keep the stakeholders engaged? So if you think about this, if you're a single project manager or you're a single project manager that has a portfolio of projects, you pretty well got your days and nights in some cases laid out for you, because you're going through all of these on some continuum basis, even if you're backed up by the most sophisticated project management software that you can possibly acquire on the planet, because it takes time and it takes humans to make the decision about the data that's being pushed out by these systems. Now, let's take a look at the tune-up side of this. When we're in a stock car race, Formula One race, you know, we've got to look at the car every once in a while. Got to look at your plan. Got to look at your strategy. Got to replace some things, maybe. Got to make some changes to the project's milestones. Got to take a look at the performance measures. Maybe you need to reassess what's going on in the macro and micro environments. And then most important is you have to take a look at the communications programs. So the first thing is you have to develop an evaluation plan. This is not just one of those things that happens at the end of every quarter. A bunch of guys get together in the room, conference room, say, okay, we need to look at our strategic plan. What's happening? What's the outputs? What's it look like? Oh, by the way, the people at front and center on that should be the strategic objective owners, the performance measure owners, and the project managers of the initiatives. You really have to develop what the roles and responsibilities are during this meeting. Who do you want to report? What are you looking for? What are you expecting them to come to report and at these evaluation meetings? You have to do a comparison of the strategic results against the plan results. Why is strategic objective number 5 not performing properly? It's always been reporting red when all of us have an intuitive knowledge that it should be yellow or green. Well, some objective owner is not watching the reporting, so maybe the targets are set wrong and hasn't been looked at. So we have to make some changes to the performance results against the targets. And then you have to look at what's going on with the projects. Are we having continual problems with milestones not being met across the board? Have we scoped those out properly? Have we estimated the cost properly? And then you have to make any changes to the strategic elements in the scorecard system, such as vision, mission, value, customer value proposition. I have a client that on an annual basis changes typically 2 things every year. Parts of their customer value proposition because their customer bases are changing. And the second thing is their enablers and challenges, or their SWOT analysis, because something's changed in their marketplace on a macro basis that tells them that they got to make some changes there, which may drive some changes to potentially a strategic objective. More importantly, the strategic initiatives that they're going to undertake for the next 12 months. Also, it's going to give them a pause to say, where are we on the initiative execution side of what we put in place 12 months ago? You're going to look at the objectives, the measures, targets, and any new strategic initiatives that you have to design. One thing I always recommend to my clients is to have that group go through the strategic management maturity model. We evaluate on all the dimensions listed there: leadership, culture, and values, strategic thinking and planning, alignment or cascading of the top level strategy to the departments and individuals, performance measurement, performance management, process improvement, and sustainability. And we evaluate against 5 levels: ad hoc and static, reactive, structured and proactive, managed and focused, and continuous improvement. You can go out and do the same thing as far as see what your score would be from what you think. If you go out to balancedscorecard.org and search on SMMM, it'll take you to the website, and you can answer the questions based on those dimensions listed there, and you give a number between 1 and 5, 1.2, 2.3, whatever. Lowest number is 1, highest number is 5, and you'll get a score back. So if you do that, I'll give you a little insight. I run this SMMM before every class starts. I also get the reports back from my clients, and clients that are very, very involved with strategic balanced scorecards, I've seen move from about a 2.8 to a 3.5 over a year or so. And most classes, the average is around 2.8. And there are outliers. Some are really low, depending on the organization, and some are very high, into the 4 and 4+ range. All depends on how long they've been working in a strategic manner. The periodic evaluation agenda itself should encompass these elements. what's the introduction and purpose of the evaluation? What are we going to look at? We're going to evaluate the strategic foundations. We're going to have presentations by those objective owners, backed up by their performance measure owners and their project managers. And we're going to take a look at that SMMM. We're definitely going to look at the communications plan, and then we're going to formulate some general suggestions and discussions. What's the biggest trap on this slide? You don't design the program and evaluating and conducting the meetings. So if you don't design the program, the evaluation agenda, many times you don't conduct the meetings, and that's a major trap. Here's an example of a periodic evaluation, especially for an organization that has scorecards at the organizational level, Tier 1, the departmental level, Tier 2, and that they put the individual and team goals in place in Tier 3. Notice the green in there. That's one that if you want a full copy of what this plan looks like, there's a lot more rows below, and there's rows out to the right. Unfortunately, PowerPoint has limited real estate space to put something reasonably well so you can see it. And I can send you PDF versions of this. But this is a suggested action items. Who's the action owner? You can see SMO plays a large part, the strategic objective owners, etc. Notice when you get down to Tier 3, a lot of HR involvement, because these individual team goals have been captured for performance review requirements over the year, and they're highly confidential because they get down to identified individuals. So don't forget to involve your HRs down around Tier 3. Macro environment, don't have to tell you guys what that is. It's everything economic, social, cultural, political, legal, technological forces, and environmental forces. Micro, inside, if you're a union shop, you know all about the macro environment with a union shop. What about your competitors, your customers should still be your primary focus. I would say in this day and age, we're seeing a lot of movement in the technological side. I don't think a day goes by out here in Silicon Valley that we don't hear about some new technological breakthrough. Might make only very small amounts of advancements, but then over time all of a sudden you see entire companies adopting these new technological breakthroughs, and it's changing the landscape for everybody. Social cultural forces, there still seems to be a lot of hot spots in the world that may have some implications, and economic forces for sure are changing every day. And so you have to have some process that looks at this on a regular basis, because that's going to feed your strategy plan, it's going to feed your scorecard, and it's also going to have an impact on the strategic initiatives and projects that you put in place. I recommend that you get used to creating a strategy profile. And you'll notice down here that these market differentiators, and you can see the dots at the end of the x-axis, you can have any number down here you want, but the way I've listed these here, this is based off of your customer value proposition. And your customer value proposition is made up of attributes, image, and relationship. And those attributes have different functions. There's a timeliness aspect, there's an economics or pricing aspect, and there's a quality aspect. So there's 4 different things that are looked at from a customer value proposition on the attributes. Plot this out where you are and where your competition is. And where you have white space, where those green circles are, you can make a conscious decision to say, that's where we should be focusing going forward for the next year. We need to close that white space on relationship. We do a lousy job at customer relationship management, but our competition is killing us because they do a great job. Well, we need to focus and invest in those areas. Others, you're very close, don't need to do anything about. The white space, got to close it up. That's where you want to get to. This is what I call the component chart. This is one that I put together specifically for myself when I do health checks against client scorecards, or clients that have called us up and said we built their scorecard 5 years ago and we think it needs a little breath of fresh air, so would you come in and do the assessment for us? And in my case, I have 23 items that I look for. And for this particular webinar, 16, 17, and 18 are the key thing because that's the project area. But the red are the ones that I see that over time are the ones that if the evaluation programs haven't been done frequently enough, they are usually in bad need of an uptick, and also the initiatives themselves. Others you have to look at to make sure that they're present. There are some that just, they did a good mission statement, a good vision statement. Their values are fine. And by the way, you'll probably see this, you'll see that number 1 line, business and support services, and think, what is that doing on a strategic component list, Joe? Well, the same strategic component list is used for the Tier 2 scorecards as well. And many times when we work with Tier 2 cascading or alignment, we can get 25 guys from a department in a room and say, okay, let's do a laundry list of the business and support processes that this department does, and invariably in that exercise somebody will say, I didn't know we did that. And so we don't have basic understanding of what a department's business and support processes are, so we have to take that into account. What's some of the traps? Well, not doing the planning for the reassessment of the M&M and not executing on it. Here's one that's the biggest. Everybody goes heads down and builds a strategic plan. I don't care if it's at the organizational Tier 1 or the department Tier 2. And then they don't allow sufficient time to monitor it and evaluate it. So not allowing sufficient time is critical. It's a critical one to get past. And then the third trap is you don't involve the entire leadership management, strategic objective owner teams at all organizational levels. Because remember, Tier 1's organization-wide, objective owners there. Tier 2 departments, support centers, they have their own strategy map. They have objective owners as well. So you've got this huge team of objective owners within the organization. Once you start the alignment process, you have to involve all of them in this evaluation and this M&M environment. Believe me, there should be no surprises on a macro and micro assessment, because you've got every one of them is out there sensing what's going on in the competitive landscape and the governmental landscape and the socioeconomic landscape and the technical landscape. They should be your best sources of information to come to these evaluation meetings. Communications plan, Tier 1. Can't get away from communications. It's got to be done as a part of the evaluation process. And again, you can request a full copy of this example. It's not meant to be the be-all event communication plans, but just one example. The key message here is one-to-one dialogue or small group dialogue. The basic goal is let's have a dialogue, and let's have that dialogue always be two-way and one-to-one or small group. As you go down the spectrum and you cross that dotted line and you hit a PowerPoint presentation, you're in bad territory to get the communications messaging across. And unfortunately, we all think, I'll just gen up an email. Heaven forbid if I'm going to send some of this stuff in text. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't get the buy-in, and it doesn't answer the question of the rank and file about what's in it for me with this strategy stuff and what's in it for me with these strategic initiatives or projects. So get up in the two-way dialogue section and have these discussions. More importantly, at the strategic initiative project portfolio management, you have to generate the communications. You saw in the PMBOK processes that there's an entire process just for communications. These are some of the things that you have to do in there. Who's the audience? What's the desired behavior? What are the resistance issues? What are the pain solved, or what's in it for me? Key messages, medium and when, and whose voice is making these deliveries. You have to do this. This is homework. If you don't have a communications department, you have to do it as the project portfolio manager, or if you have a marketing department, you can have them help you with this messaging. These people understand how to do these messages with your support. Here's our guy Cotter, under-communicating the vision by a factor of 10 or 100 or even 1,000. big error in regards to leading change, which, let's face it, the entire strategy scorecard process is a change process. On the right, in the solution, consider every possible forum and media to carry your strategic message to employees. So, what is a very easy one that I recommend to my clients? When you start having meetings after your scorecard is in place or your strategy is in place, and you set your measures up or you set your milestones on your projects, and you've got started to get data that's actionable, yet take 10 minutes of every meeting to say, let's take a look at this particular strategic objective and let's do an analysis for 10 minutes about where it is. Is it green, yellow, or red? And if it's anything but green, why? It doesn't have to be the whole scorecard. You can pick on one objective at a different meeting. The point is you're talking about, you're getting the medium out, you're getting that information out, and you're making it actionable. Pretty soon they will want to start the meetings with, hey, are we not going to hear about where we are in the strategy? Because you start ingraining that in the fabric of the organization then. Here's some big traps on communications. You don't design the plan, and you don't complete the messaging template that was back earlier about the audience and the medium and what you're trying to change on behavioral. Again, not allowing sufficient time and not involving the leadership, strategic objective owners, and not seeking communication team assistance. That's your marketers, your public relations people, whatever you have that's in-house that you can lean back on a little bit. All right, let's talk about strategically developing those projects, initiatives, and projects. As your race, like in a car race, is going on, you got to pay attention to certain things that go on. Now, in stock cars, the box is that box that's in the pit area. That in this case, NASCAR says if you're not properly in the box when you come into the pit, if your bumper is just slightly over the end line, the pit crew can't rush out and push you back. You have to put the car in reverse, and back it up yourself, driver, until you're squarely in the box. Well, that's determination and prioritization before you can launch some of these particular projects or initiatives are related to your strategy plan. And in this case, L15 says on lap 15, you got to come in and pit. That's just a case, and that's part of the evaluation process. We're going to talk about and let's look at one or two methodologies, talk a little bit about estimating approaches, and talk about the project work background structure and timelines. So if you haven't gotten the feeling by now that this process on project initiatives and portfolio management, it's all about project management 101. Here's that slide I was talking about earlier about the streams of influence. So you've gone through, created your strategic plan and strategic scorecard, and you have those objectives on there. It can be a very straightforward one. Improve knowledge, skills, and ability. Well, you're going to put some measures and targets in place, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 measures against that objective, improve knowledge, skills, and ability. And then you're going to put some initiatives or projects in place to help that objective resolve itself positively. So you're going to have to create some initiatives or projects. You're going to have to put the project measures and targets in place. And the simplest ones are through some methodology, scoping it and timelining it, and setting up the milestones and allotting the budget for it. And then monitor the resource utilization as you go through to those particular milestones for that project. Unfortunately, even from the godfather himself, Dr. Kaplan, the history shows that public sector and nonprofit organizations have the worst track record because they get all wrapped around the axle of just doing the initiatives. They don't seem to worry about the performance measures and targets. So we want to avoid that and make sure that we continue to look at both streams of influence on the strategic objective. Now this next set of slides is how do we get to those initiatives? Well, these are scenes from some of my facilitation sessions, and there's a lot of knowledge that gets dumped to the walls, gets put on post-it notes, gets hung out for everyone to take a look at because this is the genesis of where the strategic objectives come from. And in this case, you can see in the upper right quadrant, they're starting to speculate from that big set on the left, in the upper left quadrant, what the ultimate strategic objectives are. And the two larger ones are, an entire conference room that was just put together. We ran 2 teams. We get the best information and best ideas out of all the teams. But once we get to that upper right quadrant of some objectives, we got to get to some potential initiatives or projects of a strategic nature associated with those strategic objectives. Well, what's the best way to do that is to just tell everyone that's in that team that created that Tier 1 scorecard, just take a set of Post-it notes, and now I want you to brainstorm every potential project that you can possibly think of or initiative associated to those final strategic objectives, and document them and get them up on the wall. And once we get them all up on the wall, let's say that there's 10 people on that team, you give every one of them 10 votes, and you can see in this left picture, you can start to see the hash marks on that particular objective or initiative. 6 people said that was important out of the 10, so it's got a pretty high number. 7's the one above. We got 5s down below. I think these are pretty well ranked by their numbers. And so out of 100 ideas that they came up with, we got it now down to a manageable level, and maybe we cut it down to like 50, because 50 were the only ones that had either 1 vote, or in this case the maximum that was identified was 7 votes. So now we got 50 initiative ideas to associate to those strategic objectives on that strategy map. Well, the next thing you do is you take a first cycle of something called a 2x2 matrix. You create a y-axis called strategic impact and a x-axis called resources required. And what you do is you start posting those ones that 50, the ones that got votes from the previous exercise, and you just number them, and you have a facilitator work on a quadrant replicated from the page before, strategic impact, resources required, and you just have a dialogue amongst those 10 C-suite executives or strategy developers and say, where on the 4 quadrants does objective number 8, where does it fall? Well, in this case, it's high impact, really low resources. Well, the news here is, and it shouldn't be any news, anything in the lower left, and upper right, depending on where it falls, shouldn't have a problem being looked at in the next pass. In this case, the team said, well, I got 29, 30, 35, let's see, I think 35, 37. They all fell, and so they have to take a look at, do I do everything in the left 2 quadrants, and do I get pick and choosy about the ones in the upper right? Because I clearly didn't have any high resource, low strategic impact. And by the way, strictly conversation, no data analysis here. You've got the best subject matter experts, C-suite executives in the room. They know from past experience, they know what they're currently tackling, where those initiatives might fall on this grid. Now, of those 50 that they chose, maybe they only wound up, and it looks like this group only had like 37 that were left from the analysis. This requires homework. This requires heads down work. Who's the heads down work with? You can see in the upper left, the objective owner, the manager, or likely team managers and managers that will tackle these initiatives. So there's a minimum of at least 2 people taking a look at these initiatives. And they're going through a scoping section, they're going through a business case section, they're going through options, cost, schedule, assumptions, constraints, risk, and a potential communications plan for all of that 37 that were left from that quadrant analysis or 2x2 matrix cycle 1. But here's the most important cell, and it's that cell that says strategic objectives primarily impacted, because by now, once they complete out the rows of section 1, section 2, cost, assumptions, risk, communications plan, and looking at the strategic objectives, they have a very good idea about a particular initiative's impact on the objectives in that strategy map. So you might have an objective, number 37, that has an impact on 5 out of the 12 or 13. Pretty high number. Well, then you come back with cycle 2, which says, all right, now we'll change that y-axis to no more intuition, no more feelings from experience. Now we're down to pure number logic. How many objectives impacted was initiative number 5? Well, it was that number. You can create a scale. And oh, by the way, the resources based on the analysis of cost falls about a quarter way. Well, those are likely short-term wins. We probably will want to do that. Do we have some high paybacks? You bet. High impacts on a number of objectives, but high resources. But we had a whole bunch that fell into high resources but low impact on objectives. So those are questionable. This step is pure logic and ends the discussion about what projects should be done and which ones should be left in queue, so that as the ones that are completed get put back on the map to be accomplished after the wins are completed, and we move something else into the strategic column. This is a very interesting process when you go through it with the C-suite executives on an overall objective, because then they realize, well, if I've got initiative number 5 or initiative number 14 that's hitting a lot of objectives, and it only costs that amount of money in people in dollars or euros or whatever your currency is, I don't have much room to stand on to say, no, we shouldn't do that. It's pretty clear you should be doing it. So it's a nice process to really get the discussion off the table and get down to the numbers and the logic. Now, what about a project management methodology? Now, there's lots of them that are out there that are available. I mean, you can do a search on Google, project management methodologies, and I don't know how many you'll get a hit, but it's a fair number. I happen to use one called Method 123, Project Management Methodology, or MPMM, only because I've used it on other client projects. It's a nice set of templates. It's flexible. It allows me to design things into the process very easily. Probably the more important thing is when I travel offshore, if I'm in locations where the internet is questionable, it's based on my laptop, so I can do everything disconnected from the world. The nice thing about it is it tracks totally to the PMBOK processes, and it also tracks through the UK's Prince 2 phases if you happen to be a fan of Prince 2. Now, there are others. The question is, are you using one that my benchmark is, does it track to the PMBOK or the Project Management Institute's processes? If it's in that realm, I don't care what package you use. If it helps you get your project documented and get your project underway or your portfolio projects underway, it's the best thing. And if nothing else, it's going to keep you honest in your project definition, scoping, costing, estimating, tracking, communications, stakeholder, all the things that PMBOK does. So it keeps you into the entire definition, detailing, monitoring, post-implementation in the case of Method 123, MPMM. Now, estimating approaches. This is another one that's always a big issue. When we start doing estimating approaches, you can take a look at any project in general, the phases, the deliverables, and then down to the work breakdown structure at the work package level. You can use a couple of techniques from PMBOK that talk about an analogous process for pricing, parametric, or bottom-up. Now, bottom-up is the best, but it always doesn't reveal itself in the early stages of project estimating, because you now are down at the work breakdown structure and you've got ironclad numbers for those work breakdown packages at that lower level. So usually you're going to be some combination of analogous or parametric in the get-go, and you're going to make some changes as soon as you can with the bottom up. So we took an analogous, it's top-down estimating, use when very little information is available or a new project in a very similar to a previous project. So in one of the examples I'm going to show you coming up is we've got the Microsoft project, we got the work breakdown structure, we've got the timelines and the Gantt chart based on an application that's very similar to one that's being done for Mayberry Utilities. So we used a lot of analysis on that. Parametric techniques, work breakdown structure, and bottom up is applied as an estimating tool when detailed project data becomes, obviously every expenditure of the resource is taken into account. And it does result in a very transparent structured estimate which can be tracked and managed very easily. Now this is that one project management application that was done. It was a generic one for some kind of collection system. And Mayberry Utilities wanted to do a billing collection system. Well, I'm not saying it's a total fit, but it's a good start. And we can use probably parametric or analogous as a start on the scoping and the pricing. And it just has broken everything down by a typical application development process of requirements gathering, analysis, design, development, release and change, and implementation. The point here is while an MPMM or a PMBOK or a PRINCE2 will get you into the methodology realm, you still have to go into some kind of a project management tool like MS Project, like Primavera, like really big projects. There's a lot of cloud-based ones. There's one that I'm looking at now called Lean Kit, very visual, that you have to go through this process in order to get it ready and prepared to enter into your performance management software. So you're not relieved of doing this process in terms of any portfolio projects or singular initiative or strategic project. So what are the traps? Well, you don't prioritize the initiatives. It goes back to that statement I made very beginning of this presentation about, are you going to do 100 things poorly or 10 things well? So you got to go through because let's face it, at the organization level, the organization's probably got hundreds of initiatives that somebody can think of that a good number of the executives can say, yeah, we need to do that. You have to prioritize them, or you'll be working on 100 things and you'll not get anywhere close to getting those finished. Not following a prescribed project management methodology. You have to do that. That's just good document and record keeping that keeps you on track about what assumptions, what decisions, what changes, what scoping, what pricing you did, so you got a document, a record of document as to what transpired. Not fully taking the time to fully understand cost estimating, and not completing the work breakdown structure and timelines. You have to do that in order to get your performance measurement software started. Not allocating sufficient time again, and not involving all the parties, leadership, management, strategic, objective owners, teams at all levels. So when we take a look at monitoring and alignment, we obviously want maximum RPM from the system. We have to monitor a whole bunch of things going on in the system. We don't want to mess, like on the lower left one with Danica's GoDaddy number 10 car, because we don't want this system slowed down by a yellow flag because things aren't working properly. So you have to monitor all of these projects somewhere in the background. Now the good news is Balanced Scorecard Institute uses a piece of software called QuickScore, developed by Spider Strategies, and it really takes everything you work on in the development side of the scorecard and the strategy, and it replicates it in the system via the software. So this is a strategy map, a version of a strategy map for Mayberry Utilities. Any point in time, I can log onto the system, and it's going to show me what's in the green zone. And the green zone in this case says, well, the performance measures and the targets are performing as designed, and all of the projects and initiatives associated with enhanced stakeholder relationships are performing within their milestones and their parameters that we set. Budget's fine, everything's fine, and oh, by the way, things will also stay fine in the next reporting period, because looking at this reporting period and the last 6, I have a trend line that says no change in status on green, so there won't be any movement up or down. So the needle will stay steady where it is right now on the green. Unlike improved use of technology, which is green for this reporting period, its system is telling us, based on this reporting system's data on performance measures and targets and projects where they are, and comparing that to 6 months back of data, the next reporting period will move the needle closer to the yellow zone. It'll still be green, but the needle's not moving in the right direction. So we want a strong green. It's going to be moving down to a weaker green. And consequently, we see things like improved customer value. It's in the yellow zone. We can drill right down by just clicking on that objective, and it'll take us right to the performance measures and the projects so we can see why it's yellow. And more importantly, those red ones, we can click directly on those and drill down directly into the performance measures and the initiatives. And, oh, by the way, if expand customer base has some impact from improved customer communications, I can drill down into that to see if that's causing my red and not just the expand customer base by itself. I could have some impact or some effect from some other objectives on the strategy map. So there's drilling down and there's rolling up. I just had a discussion with a client today about an overarching result for a nonprofit organization, and they wanted to have 4 or 5 high-level performance measures that are just a big aggregation of all of the performance measures from all the objectives on the chart for their board. Absolutely. I said that's one of the beauties of this system is I can pull up anywhere. I can roll up any measures I want to any higher level parts on the strategy card. You start to get reports to evaluate not only your projects but your overall performance. And in this case, we have a customer financial, internal business process, and employees and organizational perspectives. Customers blue, so we can look at that up above, and there's the thresholds that were set for red, yellow, green. And in this case, blue is pretty good. It's in the yellow. Of course, on customer, we'd always like it as much as possible to be in the red or in the green, but we seem to be pretty steady state. Yeah, a couple of dips, very little into the red. Financial is the gold line or the yellow line, and had some green spots. Overall, the trending is not too bad. Internal business processes is the green line. Started out in the middle of yellow, went up into the green, came back down. So we might want to do some drill down on these later quarters to find out why that's trending downward. And then employees and organizational capacity are the red. And so far the employees, based on what we designed in the system, are pretty happy. And they're performing as expected. In fact, pretty much on a standard green, except when we look back in 2009. But currently, pretty good on the employee side. Now, with regards to initiatives, once you load in all those initiatives in the system, first thing you can do is load the task, and then you look at the objective, the targets for productivity and image, employee engagement. We got customer awareness. Those are all tasks associated with those. And those targets are related in some cases to specific objectives. In some cases, this innovation process is related to improve financial performance, improve and expand value-added services. The key message here is that I can link just about anything to anything that's inside of the system. And that comes to the point of saying once you've gone through and designed your system, you should be looking very soon to get some type of performance management software inside, because you will not want to continue to run your business with Excel spreadsheets. Some organizations are so small that that's what they have to do. But any medium to large, in this day and age with cloud-based packages, easy-to-use packages inside your firewall, and by the way, I don't care if you have very stringent security regulations on your firewalls, like in the case of Spider, we can put the database connector inside your firewall and let it send information out to the cloud so you're never receiving anything in, so your risk is minimized. you need to move to something like this, because I will tell you what happens when you go to performance-based software. It makes the strategy real for everyone in the organization, because a standard feature of most of these packages is that viewers are not, you're not charged for viewers. They want everyone to see what's going on. And when you set out your permissions, you can have the entire company, the entire board, the entire set of stakeholders log into your system and see how you're doing on certain things like revenue per customer. Do you want them to see that? You can decide if you want them to or not. But it makes the strategy real for everyone when you get it into performance software. Here's one that, based on that timeline through Microsoft Project, I started loading this into the systems. Well, we had a billing and collection systems was one of the tasks. We had to gather the requirements. We had to gather customer requirements, propose solutions, prioritize, collect, and we were going through the entire process there. And in this case, that collection system's got a pretty hefty impact on a lot of different things in the systems, like days receivable, which makes sense, IT satisfaction score, technology spend, has an impact on improved knowledge, skills, and ability, improved financial performance. So you can see how this is linked all the way across the organization. And then individual lines of the work breakdown structure have their impact as well. Monitoring alignment, not moving to a performance management analysis system soon enough. You should really be ready to load everything you've done for your scorecard strategy in very quickly. And depending on what software you use, in the case of QuickScore, I've had clients move their software and their system in about 4 to 5 days. It's very straightforward to use. And another thing is you have to adopt this viewpoint of your performance management system is just that. It's reporting the performance of your strategy or your strategic scorecard. You don't want to turn your performance management system into a project management system. Let the project management system reside outside the performance and just feed data into it. You don't want the performance management system to be a heavy-duty analytical predictive engine. Let the system send out data to something like an SPSS, a TIBCO Spotfire, a Statistica, where then you can work on all that output from the performance management system, do everything you want to do in the predictive analytics side, then send the results back into your performance management system to say, ooh, if I had these numbers, how would my strategy look? So that you can do the what-if analysis on your strategy. Keep your performance management system just that, against your objectives and the results of your projects. Project management systems, outside. Predictive analytics systems, outside. And anything else, you want this performance management system to just be a hub that receives information and maybe sends it out for those other systems to number crunch on and analyze. Don't allow enough time to bring that alignment and monitoring process in. And again, you have to involve a large number of people, strategic objective owner teams, and at all levels when you do the monitoring and alignment. I'd like to say I'd ask questions, but hopefully if you've had questions, you will get a link on this within the next few days, because it doesn't take us very long to set this link up. If you copy down those 2 email addresses, send me your questions. I'll get back to you. If you want a copy of the presentation in PDF format, I'll send that out to you as well. If you want copies of those communications and evaluation sample plans, I'll send those to you as well. Hopefully you'll get a chance to look at our Institute Way book. It was just released last year. I can tell you categorically from the classes that I teach, especially the Balanced Scorecard Professional class, it's a 5-day class. The 5-day class is embodied in this book. So that goes without saying that if you're a good book learner, you can understand everything that I went through in this webinar, things on alignment, things on performance measure setting, strategic objective development, performance measure development is inside the covers of this book. It all depends on how diligent you are in terms of a book learner. We're just about at the end of the hour and a half. My best advice to you is now just go for it. Hopefully you can cross the finish line successfully. All green lights, get the checkered flag. And I would advocate that, once again, I left my, I didn't put my email address there, but you probably copied it down from the previous slide. Anytime you got a question, shoot me an email. I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. And I hope the webinar was informative, and we'll send you the link out as soon as I get it uploaded to our servers, and our administrator sends out the link. If you need the deck, send me a private email, and any of the other supporting documents. I want to thank you for your time, and we're moving into getting daylight here in the next 4 or 5 hours, and you'll be going in tonight. And I hope you have a good evening, or rest of the afternoon, good evening, and best of luck on all your strategy, project, and portfolio management efforts. Have a great rest of your day and evening. Thank you for attending.